snap. There's the kick. It's gone. Oh my gosh. The kick is gone.
B.S.N Sports Nerd present Joe's Fantasy Field Goal.
What's up, guys? We are back at it again on a Tuesday night. I just left my fantasy Madden draft to come do this. So, obviously, priorities. You guys are a top one for me to leave something as important as a Madden fantasy draft. But it needs to get done. Every Tuesday, I need to give out some fantasy advice. So you know the deal. It's Joe's Fantasy Field Goal, 3 points to help you win your fantasy league. Today we got point 1 is going to be Anquan Boldin retiring and what that means for the Bills. I think it has a pretty big impact actually for certain players. Negatively impacts some. It positively impacts a couple. So we'll get into that. Point 2 is just going to be some preseason spotlights. I'm going to talk about some different camp battles that are fantasy relevant, some injuries that have happened, how some people have looked in preseason so far. I'm not going to go over all of the preseason things. I'm just going to touch on a few things. But we're gonna do some fantasy relevant stuff that has to do with preseason, and then point 3 is kind of a mock draft, I guess. It's not really. I'm not doing the mock drafts I have been doing, where it's like on the Draft Wizard website doing mock drafts and then going over them with you. I did a draft for my family league. I know it's a little early, but it just worked out that way, and I think we'll be alright anyway. It's a keeper league. I'll go over my team, who I drafted. I'm not going to go over the whole draft because it's not actually written down in order of pick. So I just tried to remember how I picked as best as I could, like round-wise. So I'm going to go over who I picked, why I picked them there, and I really like this team. It's a keeper league, so I have a bunch of really good players on this team, actually. And I'll explain all that when we get into it. But let's get into point 1.
I said I'm with it if you with it. Point 'em out.
Alright, guys. So Anquan Boldin retired. He showed up at Bills training camp, I don't know, not that long ago. I think a couple weeks ago. He looked around, he watched them trade away a couple of their best players, and he said, alright, I'm out then. You guys aren't going to try and win. I'm not going to play a season just to, play football and lose. So he bailed. He's done. He retired. He said he's going to focus on human rights. This isn't about Anquan Boldin retiring, though. This is about how it affects the rest of the Bills' offense and how fantasy relevant it is. And I think it is pretty fantasy relevant for 4 people. Charles Clay, Zay Jones, Tyrod Taylor, and LaShawn McCoy. I think it negatively affects Tyrod Taylor and LaShawn McCoy, and I think it is a big positive for both Zay Jones and Charles Clay. So, we'll do the negative first. Tyrod Taylor has no one to throw to anymore. He has Charles Clay and Zay Jones. And he has Jordan Matthews, but Jordan Matthews is hurt right now. We don't know how long it's going to take for him to come back. He did start practicing, but he's still in a ton of pain. And I don't think it's anytime soon. And he hasn't really had any time to get on any sort of page with Tyrod Taylor. So that offense is going to be out of sync. And I don't think Tyrod Taylor is in a good position to succeed this year. And a little heads up for point 3. this kind of sucks because I took Tyrod Taylor in this draft and then found out Anquan Boldin retired. So, that sucked. But the other person this affects is LaShawn McCoy. And that's because I'm expecting a lot of stacked boxes against the Bills this year. Everyone knows LaShawn McCoy is their best weapon. They're going to use him a lot. And I just think they're going to key on the run so much. It's going to hurt LaShawn McCoy in the long run. If the team can't pass at all, it's going to be real tough to run against, 8, 9-man boxes. So I'm down on LaShawn McCoy and I'm down on Tyrod Taylor after Anquan Boldin left. There's a silver lining, I guess, LaShawn McCoy. He has a solid chance of leading the team in receptions. I'm not even joking. They're going to throw to him a lot. He's going to be involved. So I'm not down on LaShawn McCoy. He's still a first-round pick. He's still probably the third running back off the board. Maybe fourth, I guess. But he's definitely in the top 5. And that shouldn't change. He's going to be used. He's going to be a great running back. I think he's definitely going to be keyed on. As if he wasn't already, but it's going to be harder for the Bills to try and stop defenses from keying on him because they just aren't really that threatening in the passing game. Tyrod Taylor's stock definitely goes down. It's going to be harder for him to run around. He doesn't have reliable targets. Zay Jones is a first-year receiver. He's not really on the same page with him yet. But he will be the best receiver out there, so I'm expecting him to get the most targets out of the receiving core. We'll go into the positives, I guess. Zay Jones gets an uptick out of necessity because he's the only one there. And he was a relatively high draft pick for them. And he's going to be their best starting receiver until Jordan Matthews comes back. And I don't know what kind of page Jordan Matthews and Tyrod Taylor are going to be on. But I would expect Zay Jones to get peppered with a decent amount of targets. And he's a pretty good receiver, so he'll definitely be fantasy relevant, that is for sure. I think the guy who gets the biggest uptick, though, is Charles Clay. Charles Clay looks like Tyrod Taylor needs him out there. If Charles Clay isn't out there, then their offense isn't moving at all. I think he's going to be the most reliable receiver on the team. I thought Anquan Boldin was going to be good for about 6 touchdowns. I'm putting a lot of those to Charles Clay. If he can stay healthy, Charles Clay definitely has the potential to be a monster tight end this year. And he's going super late. No one gives a fuck about Charles Clay right now. And you should pay attention to him. That is for sure. So I'm a little down on Tyrod Taylor, a little down on LaShawn McCoy after the Boldin retiring, and I'm up on Zay Jones and Charles Clay. Seriously, Charles Clay, though, if you're going to punt tight end and wait, Charles Clay should be your pickup, I think. If you're going to wait on tight end, if you're not going to get one of those really, really good guys, if your tight end is going to be your last pick before kicker defense, take Charles Clay, because I think he's going that late. I think he's still undrafted, or maybe last round. So Charles Clay should be your pick at tight end if you're willing to punt tight end. If you're not going to get a Jordan Reed or a Gronk, Tyler Eifert or anything like that, pick up Charles Clay. All right, on to point 2. All right, point 2 is just going to be a preseason spotlight. I have some stuff written down here. I'm just going to go over some camp battles, an injury,
Point
some
time.
people I've noticed, just general
Going for
thoughts
2.
on a couple different things in preseason that I've seen. I'm not going to go game by game over every preseason game, but this is just some stuff I've picked out that I think is fantasy relevant. So the Texans and the Broncos have solved their camp battle at quarterback. The Texans will be starting Tom Savage. The Broncos will be starting Trevor Siemian. I think it's the right choice for both of them. I know Deshaun Watson has looked really good in preseason, but he's still a rookie. Tom Savage has not looked bad by any means. And I think Deshaun Watson benefits from sitting a year and getting used to the speed of the NFL. What does this mean for the Texans offense? I think DeAndre Hopkins gets a slight tick if the Tom Savage I saw last year is anything like the Tom Savage I saw this year. It means Nuke Hopkins is going to get peppered with targets. I think he had like 11 in one game last year with Tom Savage. I think he averaged about 9 to 11 targets every time Tom Savage was on the field. So that's good for Nuke. Other than that, the tight ends in Houston get a bump down because Brock Osweiler is gone, and no one targets the tight end quite like Brock Osweiler does, so he throws to almost exclusively. So don't expect Fedorowicz or is it Griffin, the other guy there, to have nearly as many targets as they did last year. They'll still Fedorowicz will probably still be a little fantasy relevant, but I'm expecting more targets to wide receivers and maybe Lamar Miller. And Savage isn't afraid to throw the ball downfield, at least a little. He's not the check down king like Brock Osweiler is, so that might help Lamar Miller as far as defenders in the box and stuff. So hopefully Lamar Miller can have a better season than he did last year. For the Broncos, Simeon was the right choice. Paxton Lynch hasn't looked great in preseason at all. And we saw what, as opposed to Houston last year, we didn't really see a Tom Savage Houston until the end of the year. Tom Savage Houston, let's try this again. We didn't really see a Tom Savage Houston team until late last year. We saw a Simeon-led Broncos team all of last year. I would expect a similar year, maybe slightly better. Demaryius Thomas is super safe, probably the safest wide receiver 2 you can have. Emmanuel Sanders is going later, but I think he loses a little bit from Paxton Lynch not being the starter, because it seemed like Paxton Lynch liked to target Emmanuel Sanders a little bit more. But either way, I think you can expect projections pretty much right where they were from last year. Let's see what else we got here. OBJ got hurt. He got hit kind of awkwardly, and from OBJ's lips, it's just an ankle sprain. It's not that big of a deal. I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I think he'll be fine for the regular season. I just hope it's not one of those nagging injuries that sticks around. If OBJ is out, Brandon Marshall gets a bump up. I know he got hurt too, but his is just a shoulder sprain or something like that. He'll be fine, he said. But yeah, if OBJ is out, I think Brandon Marshall is got a pretty significant uptick. He quickly becomes the number 1 receiver there, especially with Sterling Shepard gone for now. But I think OBJ will be fine. I'm not really worried about him for the regular season. But we'll just keep an eye on that. Moving on, Christian McCaffrey, who I have been kind of meh about, it has been electric in the preseason. He has flashed all of that speed and pop that we saw from his college years. He's really shown out. I guess he's the number 8 pick for a reason, and he sure has looked like it in the preseason. I think he'll be involved. I'm expecting the Carolina Panthers offense to be better than it was last year. Cam Newton seems to be on this every other year schedule where he kind of sucks and then he's better and then he sucks and then he's better and then he sucks. And right now he's on one of those better years. So I'm expecting an uptick in Carolina Panthers offense. I think Christian McCaffrey will be a big part, and I think he'll be more involved than I thought he was going to be a couple weeks ago. And he's looked great. He has looked absolutely great. I still think he's getting drafted really high, but that just comes with the like an exciting rookie territory. So I think McCaffrey is going to be great this year. I think he's looked really good so far. Moving on, Sean McVay, the new head coach of the Rams. I think he's good for business. In the couple preseason games I've seen, like mostly highlights, I haven't really watched a full Rams preseason game. That would be weird. But the Rams have looked good. Not like, Super Bowl contender, playoff contender good, but they've been able to move the ball way better than Jeff Fisher's bum ass could do in LA last year. McVay is bringing a pretty successful pedigree from the Redskins, where he had a good offense, and I think he'll be good for the Rams. I think he's going to be good for Todd Gurley. I would expect Todd Gurley to have a better season than he did last year. I don't know if he'll ever return to form where he's drafted as high as he was last year, which is why he was disappointing to people. He was still a running back 2 last year, so he wasn't. He was a disappointment based on where he was drafted. He was a bust, but based on where he's going now, in the second, if you can get him as your running back 2, if you're willing to go running back, I think Todd Gurley's super safe as running back 2. And if he's used anywhere near as much as he was last year, he will have a better season. I am super up on Todd Gurley right now. I think Sammy Watkins got a bump. I don't think Sammy Watkins got a bump. I think Sammy Watkins provided a bump to that offense, just swagger-wise. I think they're more confident. They've got a big-name receiver over there now, and I think Jared Goff has looked really good. So McVay might be able to turn this Rams shit around, and hopefully they'll be somewhat productive this year on offense. I think right now the most fantasy relevant, the fantasy player on the Rams that I'm still the highest on is Todd Gurley. I don't expect their receivers to be amazing. I don't expect their tight end to be relevant really at all. Jared Goff is still not really a quarterback I'm looking for, except for maybe 2 quarterback leagues as a quarterback 2 or 3. But I think McVay can turn around the Rams and make them a much better offense than they were last year. And the final note from the preseason spotlights is Blake Bortles is in trouble. I think there is a strong possibility he does not have the starting quarterback job by week 8 of this season, and it belongs to Chad Henne. There's already reports that they're splitting Team 1 reps in training camp 50-50, which isn't good at all. He hasn't looked great at all. There's that infamous video with Allen Robinson talking to himself, saying keep the ball in bounds when he's talking about Blake Bortles overthrowing him. It's just not looking good for Blake Bortles. I would stay away from him in 2 quarterback leagues. He's not worth being drafted in a single quarterback league. And in 2 quarterback leagues, I would try and stay away from him as much as you can, because I don't know how reliable he will be halfway through the season. I think there's a good possibility he could be gone. Not the starting quarterback anymore, gone. But that's what I've got down for preseason spotlights. We'll move on to a recap of the fantasy draft, the real fantasy draft. It's not a mock, technically. It's a real draft. We'll recap the draft I did in place of a mock, and I'll go over who I picked and why. So on to point 3. Alright, so I had a family draft this weekend. It's a weird league. It is an 8-team. No, that's really small, I know. So a bunch of people have super teams, including myself. It is an 8-team, 2 quarterback, 3 running
Puts up the 3!
3 wide receiver, no flex, tight end, kicker, defense, and then it has 11 bench slots. You keep 1 quarterback, you keep 2 running backs, you keep 2 wide receivers, or a wide receiver and a tight end. My keepers in that league are Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, David Johnson and Isaiah Crowell at running back, and Julio Jones and my newly acquired Odell Beckham Jr. At wide receiver. I made a trade. I was. Let me preface this by saying I did not offer this trade. This trade was offered to me. One of the guys in the league, and I guess I'll use this as a tip. Know your league and know your league mates. This league is filled with Patriots fans. I'm a Patriots fan, and there are some diehard Patriots fans in this league. The guy offered me Odell Beckham Jr. for Brandon Cooks. Now, I know Brandon Cooks has a lot of hype, but that's a real lot of hype to trade OBJ, so I took that in a heartbeat, as every one of you listening should. And so now I have Julio Jones and Odell Beckham as my wide receiver keepers in that league. David Johnson and Isaiah Crowell as my running back keepers, and Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback keeper. Yes, my team is stacked, and I'm real happy about it. So those are my keepers. Now we get to draft. We do a random pick every year. They randomize the draft order. Has nothing to do with your previous record. So really good teams can get a really high pick and add on. I got the 3rd pick in the draft this year. And I said I wasn't going to go over who everyone picked, but I do remember the first 2 picks. Obviously, Leonard Fournette went first. He was available, obviously, because he's a rookie. The first pick was Leonard Fournette. The second pick was Michael Thomas, who was available. I think he might have gotten cut. So Michael Thomas went 2. And I got Todd Gurley with my first pick. At the time I drafted Todd Gurley, I think Marshawn Lynch and... Nope. It was the 3 top-rated running backs I had on my list at the time when I took Gurley were Fournette, Lynch, and Gurley. I wanted Fournette, but obviously he went first. I had Gurley ranked 2nd, and then Lynch ranked 3rd out of those running backs. So I took Gurley first. Like I said, he'll be my running back 2. I think Crowell will be running back 3. But he's super safe as a running back 2. And if I can get a good season out of Crowell, my running back core will be absolutely dominant, obviously barring injury, to go along with the 2 best receivers that pretty much are in the league, outside of Antonio Brown, on my receiving core. So I took Gurley with my first pick. Then obviously I have to wait from 3 to 8 and then back to 3 again. It's a serpentine, so snake draft. So I took Gurley round 1. When it got back to me, I had planned to go wide receiver with my 2nd round, but Lynch was still there. And we start 3 running backs. I know my wide receiving core was really good already because I have Julio Jones and OBJ, and it's a standard league, so I decided I was going to take Marshawn Lynch when he got back to me, because he fell, and he's still a good running back. And now I can play matchups between Crowell, Gurley, and Lynch to decide who will be 2 of my 3 starting running backs. David Johnson's just going to start every week pretty much. So Lynch fell back to me at round 2. So I'll happily take him. And I have a quick turnaround, 3-2-1, then back 1-2-3. So I only had to wait a few picks, and round 3 I took Martavis Bryant as my first wide receiver I drafted outside of my 2 keepers. So I have 2 pretty safe stud keepers in Julio Jones and Odell Beckham. And I saw Martavis Bryant there. I had him ranked pretty high. I think he's a pretty risky pick, but I think the upside on Martavis Bryant is insane. And if he's any way like how he was previously before he got suspended, I was willing to take the risk there for a 3rd receiver that's really boom or bust to pair with my 2 safe studs that I have already. So that was a I'll go big or go home kind of pick for me there. And it worked out because I was able to pair him after the long wait from 3 all the way to 8 and then back again, Michael Crabtree was still there. So it doesn't get much safer than Michael Crabtree. He is a wide receiver 1 that's getting drafted like a wide receiver 2, and I managed to grab him as my wide receiver 4. So, like I said, it's an 8-team league, so there are some super teams, and it doesn't get much more super than a Aaron Rodgers, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, OBJ, Julio Jones, Martavis Bryant, Michael Crabtree team. But like I said, to go along with those 3 guys, Michael Crabtree's perfect complementary piece. Super safe. He's pretty much guaranteed to be a wide receiver 1 or 2. And I got him as my 4th receiver. So I can play matchups. I can decide, hey, Martavis Bryant has a bad matchup against the defense this week. Crabtree's pretty much locked and loaded. So I like that as my 4th receiver off the board. Again, I'm trying to remember. The way I had the draft saved, it didn't have round by round picks, so I was just looking at my team and trying to figure out how I had drafted them. So as best as I can remember, this is how the rounds went. After I took Crabtree, we had the short turnaround again. And I grabbed Frank Gore, who is still there, and technically the 8th round, if you consider the first 3 rounds to be keepers, and then Gurley, Lynch, Bryant, Crabtree as the next 4. So that's the first 7 rounds technically. Gore was my 8th round pick. He's pretty consistently right on the fringe of running back 1, running back 2. So to get him in the 8th round, to pair with Gurley, Crowell, David Johnson, it's just a safe bet that Gore will produce fantasy-wise, especially if I'm torn a little bit, because if Andrew Luck is hurt, I would imagine Gore gets the ball more because they don't trust their backup quarterback. But I don't know how effective it'll be giving the ball to Gore, because I would imagine the box is going to be incredibly stacked to try and stop him, because they're not worried about the backup throwing at all. But as a 4th running back, 5th running back at this point, if I can get running back 2 out of my 5th running back, I'm doing pretty well. After I took Gore, I had the long wait again, and I made a mistake actually. Brandon Marshall was sitting on the board. Now I'm expecting Brandon Marshall to have a big year. I had just acquired OBJ. I am not used to having OBJ on my team. I wasn't thinking. I took Brandon Marshall. I don't know how comfortable I feel having both Brandon Marshall and OBJ on the same team. I guess I could look at it as a handcuff thing, considering he's my 6th receiver at this point. I'm sorry, 5th receiver at this point. But I might look to try and flip him down the line. I probably shouldn't have taken Marshall there, but he's not a terrible pick. It's just I don't know I'm probably not going to start OBJ and Marshall the same week. So maybe I can flip him for a different receiver, especially if he starts going off. I might be able to trade him for a safer pick. But I'm not completely pissed off about it. Marshall's still a good receiver, and if OBJ gets hurt, it really helps Marshall's stock. So I guess I'll look at it as a handcuff for now, but I'm probably going to be looking to trade Marshall somewhere down the line. So we get to round 7, which is technically round 10. And quarterbacks, most teams have already drafted their second quarterback in this 2-quarterback league. I think I was the last person to draft their second quarterback, and Andy Dalton was still available. I'm really high on Andy Dalton this year. I think he'll be great. He had a down year last year, but he's been great every other year in fantasy. So I took Dalton as my second quarterback in this 2-quarterback league to go along with A-Raj. So I love my quarterbacks. I'm glad I managed to wait that long and still get Dalton. and I watched other people take quarterbacks. While I managed to stack up on Martavis Bryant and Michael Crabtree, Frank Gore, Brandon Marshall. Quarterbacks were going, as early as round 1. So I'll gladly stock up on skill position players and take Andy Dalton in round 10, technically, I guess. It was round 7 if you don't count the keeper rounds. So, actually, there's 5 keepers total. So that would be round 12. I'm sorry, not round 10. It wouldn't be 3 rounds of keepers. So round 12, technically, I drafted Andy Dalton, if that's how you want to think about it. Round 7 if you don't count the keeper rounds. But still, I waited a long time, managed to grab a really good second quarterback, and I'm real happy about it because I'm stacked. I'm loaded at other positions. So round 8 on the short turnaround after I grabbed Andy Dalton, I look, Tyler Eifert is there, a tight end I'm high on. I'm pretty loaded at running back and receiver at this point. I figure I'll grab Tyler Eifert to do the pairing with Andy Dalton, and try and double dip a couple of weeks. Eifert's a touchdown machine. I think he'll have a great year if he can stay healthy. In this league, you are required. There's position minimums. So we're an 8-team league. You have to have a minimum of 4 quarterbacks on your team. You have to have a minimum of, I think, 5 running backs. 6 running backs. A minimum of 6 running backs. A minimum of 6 receivers. And a minimum of 2 tight ends. So, I took Eifert as my first tight end. I had to draft another tight end, so I'll get into that a little later. So after I take Eifert to pair with Dalton, I drafted Jeremy Maclin in round 9 as my last receiver I could draft. He was my 6th receiver. This is round 9, technically round 14. It's totally, ridiculously late in the draft. Jeremy Maclin's the wide receiver 1 on the Ravens, and he's so far down my lineup that I can wait Joe Flacco out if he's going to be out the first couple weeks. I think he's going to be peppered with targets. Maybe he gets cut at this point. That far down in the draft, it doesn't really matter. But if I hold on to him, it really doesn't affect me that much. And I think he has the highest upside to be a really good receiver that I saw there that was left. So I'll gladly take Jeremy Maclin there. Round 10, I took Kyle Rudolph as my second tight end. I didn't really have, at this point, I had to pick 2 other quarterbacks and 1 other running back. And a lot of teams already had 3 quarterbacks at this point, so I wasn't really worried about a bunch of quarterbacks coming off the board. So I figured I'll take another good, safe tight end to pair with Eifert, just in case Eifert gets hurt. Kyle Rudolph is pretty much the safest tight end it gets. The dude plays all the time, every game, and he's always peppered with targets, especially with Sam Bradford there now. I'm trying to talk a little bit better, huh? So yeah, I took super safe Kyle Rudolph, but I like him to pair with Tyler Eifert because Eifert is injury prone and Kyle Rudolph is safe as the backup there. Then I took Tyrod Taylor. I know I just talked about how he probably it's not great, Tyrod Taylor losing Anquan Boldin. But I took him anyway. Tyrod Taylor is sneaky good fantasy quarterback. I believe he was a quarterback 1 last year. Or he's right on the fringe. If you look at consistency reports, he finished as a quarterback 1 over 50% of the time. I really like him as my 3rd quarterback, just to play matchups with, and if he has a stinky week, he has a stinky week. Hopefully I didn't start him then. But as my 3rd quarterback, to get a guy who was the past couple of years been right around a quarterback 1. I can't really pass that up. Round 12, I had to take one more running back, and Rob Kelly was still there. There were some other guys there. I know Alvin Kamara was there, Jamal Williams, some younger guys who might have a chance to take over a starting role. In my opinion, Rob Kelly is still the starting running back in Washington. I don't think he's done anything to lose that job yet. I know he might lose that job to Samaje Perine, but he hasn't yet, and he was a good running back last year, and as of right now, he's still the starter. So to get a starting running back pretty much in the second to last round of a draft, as far as where skill position players go before kickers and defenses, I'll always take that pick. So with Rob Kelly there, that was an easy pick for me. So I took a starting running back at this point, like the 17th round. And then I took Alex Smith with my last pick before kickers and defenses. Obviously, I waited. My last 2 picks were kickers and defenses. So I took Alex Smith as my last quarterback. He's just safe. And I know there's a chance he might lose his job. I don't know if I buy into that all the way. I don't think Alex Smith has ever played that bad where he deserves to lose his job. So I think he'll be fine. And as my 4th quarterback, I'm really just plugging him in at bye weeks at this point. And I just need him to get me through 2 weeks. He can get me through 2 weeks. Really just 1 week, because Tyrod Taylor happens to have the same bye week as I think Aaron Rodgers. So if he can just get me through 1 week when Aaron Rodgers is out and Tyrod Taylor is out, I'll be fine. And I'm not super worried about it. But yeah, that was the draft. I'll just go over it real quick one more time. Gurley round 1, Marshawn Lynch round 2, Martavis Bryant round 3, Michael Crabtree round 4, Frank Gore round 5, Brandon Marshall round 6, Andy Dalton round 7, Tyler Eifert round 8, Jeremy Maclin round 9, Kyle Rudolph round 10, Tyrod Taylor round 11, Rob Kelly round 12, and Alex Smith round 13. And those guys go along with my keeper quarterback Aaron Rodgers, my 2 keeper running backs David Johnson and Isaiah Crowell, my 2 keeper wide receivers Julio Jones and Odell Beckham Jr. Jesus, those guys are studs. And then I have these guys that I drafted. So that team's pretty much locked and loaded as the best team in the league, barring injury. And I'm happy about that. But yeah, that's been it. That's it, guys. That's 3 points. I don't know how much me recapping my family draft and showing how utterly dominant my team is really helps you with your fantasy league, but maybe you can get some insight into why I picked who I picked and looking at team composition and things like that. But yeah, so thanks for listening again, guys, and I'll see you next week.